It's Bubsy the Bobcat in Claws Encountered of the Furred Kind. This is one of the most, I'd say, controversial games of all time. A game that was incredibly hyped and a game that absolutely did not deliver. Yet there's people out there that believe this is a good game. This review is really going to dissect that. I'm not going to play this too much. Let's get it started on the Retron 5. I'm got an ASCII pad, which is an awesome pad. It's got turbo for every single button, though I try not to use turbo. And here comes Bubsy. Again, I'm not going to play this just yet. I want to talk about it. A lot of people probably don't even know what Bubsy is, so let's talk about this a little bit. So back in the day, 1992, as you can see, earlier than that, there was this obsession with mascots. Now, you don't think about this today, but really as late as just a few years ago, you had a lot of websites and TV shows, G4, they were always talking about mascots. And it started with really Microsoft, sort of this new generation of talking about mascots, because Microsoft doesn't have a mascot. Who's their mascot? Is it Master Chief? Nintendo never said Mario's our mascot. Sega never said Sonic's our mascot. NEC never said Bonk is our mascot. Just because you have a successful platformer and you make sequels because it's a successful game and that's what you do when you have successful games, doesn't mean you have a mascot. It's not like Sega was going around in every single product they had Sonic on it. Same thing with Nintendo. They didn't put, even if a console didn't come with a Mario game, they didn't put Mario on the box. They had a lot of games on the back, but it wasn't just Mario, it was a lot of games. So the concept of a mascot was preposterous, but everybody was talking about it. It was so much that Accolade felt like they had to have a mascot to be successful. That's why Bubsy exists. Accolade didn't sit there and say, we need a great game. They said, we need a mascot. We need a platformer with a cute character, with an exciting character. So they basically tried to copy Sonic. That was their intention. Bubsy is a horrible... the exclamation point on his shirt. Here's attitude. What an awfully designed character. But let's go back a little bit further. So Accolade had a beef with Sega. And I believe that's why Bubsy came to the Super NES first. And this is a big problem that we'll get into later as you watch the computer try to play this mess of a game. So Accolade didn't want to pay the $10 to $15 that Sega was charging for licensing, which is absolutely insane since Genesis games were only $50. Nowadays, if you were to release a game on the Xbox One or the PS4, you're paying $5. But 10 or 15 back then, and Nintendo was pretty bad on the NES, which is the whole Tengen thing, which was a division of Atari, trying to make games without getting them licensed because they didn't want a third of their profits going straight to the console manufacturer. So Accolade didn't want to pay 20% of the store cost of a game, which was $50 on average, to Sega. So what they did is they bought a console and figured out how to get their games running on it, and there was a big lawsuit, and the settlement actually had Accolade becoming a licensed publisher, developer of Sega Genesis games. Accolade had to pay a lot of money, I believe. And there were a lot of games that came out before that. I think one of the most popular ones, like Turrican, I think Turrican was an unlicensed game. So Accolade didn't like Sega, and they didn't like paying the licensing fees. Certainly, Nintendo was charging the same licensing fees. So I think one of the reasons why Bubsy and Accolade thought Bubsy was going to be a monster hit. One of the reasons why I think it came out on the Super Nintendo first was because they had a beef with Sega. But I think the main reason was because this was a Sonic ripoff. Accolade knew there was no Sonic game on the Super Nintendo, so they said, let's release it on the Super Nintendo. It makes more sense. How did this become a Sega knockoff? Well, it started with the developer, the creator of Bubsy, Michael Berlin. I'm assuming his name is pronounced Berlin. I don't know for sure. So I'm going to call him... I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it, but I've never heard it pronounced, so I'm going to call him Michael Berlin. Michael Berlin Who, first of all, this is not a poorly programmed game. I'm actually impressed, considering the way the Super NES hardware is designed, that he was able to do some of the things that he did. It's actually kind of impressive. There are concessions made, we'll get into that. But I've been programming games a long time. I couldn't have done this on a Super Nintendo. Absolutely not. He's infinitely more. And I don't know if he programmed it. He's just listed as a creator. I'd have to go through the credits to really find out. But I assume he probably programmed it, because most or many designers were programming back then. Nowadays, that just doesn't happen that often. Though some people still do write code. Anyways, he was a big fan of Sonic. I can't remember if it was Sonic 1 or 2. I think it was Sonic 1 where he is quoted as saying he played it for 16 hours straight. It's interesting because he defends Bubsy. He thinks it's a pretty good game. He doesn't want to rip on it. I don't blame him, because I think there are elements of it that are pretty cool, but there's a lot to despise. So it's a game where you move very quickly. Now let's talk about where do we begin? Let's talk about the problems with doing this on the Super Nintendo. Again, he loves Sonic. They wanted to do a Sonic game, a Sonic style game. Super Nintendo didn't have anything like that yet, so let's put it out on the Super Nintendo. Now, if you look at Capcom, who are great developers, they had serious issues with slowdown in their games. Super Ghouls and Ghosts, the first level has insane slowdown. If you look at the Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse, a lot of slowdown there. Anytime you break open the little coin boxes, you'd have a lot of slowdown. Think about this game. There's a lot of stuff happening on screen. Look at this right here. You've got all these balls of yarn. You've got several layers of parallax scrolling. You've got the screen moving very quickly. And yet it's pretty smooth. It's running at 60 frames per second. In order to do that, you have to make concessions. And the thing about Bubsy is that when you start playing it, it just doesn't feel very good. The controls just don't fit. The other thing about Bubsy is that he moves on slopes. Very different. This is going to be difficult to explain, because the way you had to program... If you think about the earliest platformers, the ground levels were flat. Everything was flat. Go back to Super Mario Brothers. Super Mario Brothers 1, you couldn't walk down a slope. It wasn't until Super Mario Brothers 3 that you could go down slopes. If you're just walking on flat platforms, you don't have to make as many... You don't have to look at your collisions as much. It's actually very simple. When you start going up and down slopes, it becomes incredibly more complex. Sonic had very different slopes. Right here you can see there's some slopes here. These all look to be about the same angle. That's a different one. That's not the same angle as the other grass slopes that he was on. So that adds a lot to the physics engine. A lot of sprites on the screen, that adds a lot. So one of the things you're going to notice early on about Bubsy is that most enemies just kind of stand there. Enemies don't tend to move around, because if you start moving them around, then you have to start worrying about more physics, especially if they're going up and down slopes. So really the game, for the most part, I don't know if there's any enemies that go up and down slopes. I guess as we watch this demonstration, we may see that, so keep an eye on that. Again, I haven't gotten very deep into this game. But see, those enemies, they're moving left and right, but do they ever go up and down the slopes? You're not going to see them on these branches, I would imagine, because you've got to be very careful with what you do with the physics. These balls of yarn, this is something that I think is interesting, because I think the balls of yarn were supposed to act exactly like rings did in Sonic. But I don't know if the Super Nintendo could handle Bubsy getting hit and all the yarn flying out. And this brings us to something really interesting. The biggest problem that this game has, the absolute biggest problem, is that it tried to be Sonic, and it copied it. They didn't do the loops, which that could have been just, they didn't know how to do it. That's not easy to program, because you're inverting gravity for a moment. Very difficult to do. The biggest thing they screwed up when copying Sonic, and it's something that might seem like it was not a big deal, but it's the most brilliant thing about Sonic. It's the thing that makes Sonic work, and it shows you why Bubsy's broken. The one thing, Sonic's a cool character, the rings are cool, the The enemies are cool. How they made the graphics look a little bit 3D, like the palm trees looking like they're composed of polygons. The music, the water, all the layers of parallax scrolling in the water, Dr. Robotnik, all that stuff means nothing if not for one tiny, insignificant, but completely significant factor that when you get hit, you're still alive because of the way rings operate. Because when you get hit, you lose all your rings, but you can recollect them. Now think about if you're pitching a game idea to someone in the 1987, 1988. You see, I'm going to make it really fast, but here's the catch. There's going to be rings everywhere. You collect these rings. When you get hit, as long as you have one ring or more, you're still alive. When you get hit, you lose the rings, but they don't just disappear. They fly out and you can recollect them. If you told someone this was your design, their reaction would be, it's going to be way too easy. You'll never die. You get hit and the rings fly away, just go grab them. You're never going to die. The game is too easy. And yet, Sonic games are not too easy. They're a perfect blend of challenge, reward, and getting further and further. That's what's missing from Bubsy the Bobcat. And the reason why Bubsy's broken is because you have all this speed, but you run into an enemy and you're dead. Here's the other problem with the limitations of Super Nintendo hardware. You'll notice there's not a lot of enemies. Sonic's almost all enemies. When you die, you're almost never falling in a hole, into the abyss. You're almost always getting killed by an enemy. In Bubsy, most of the time, you're falling into water and you're dying. So you're running fast, making leap of faith jumps and falling right into water because the Super NES hardware did not allow for enough enemies or complex enemies. Enemies that just stood there. And a lot of times does the Ninja Gaiden thing where you jump to a ledge and guess what? There's an enemy right there waiting to annihilate you that's just standing there doing some silly animation. So the most important factor of Sonic being successful is missing from Bubsy. Everything else, now Bubsy's not programmed as well. The physics aren't nearly as good. And I'm going to show you something right here. I'm going to go ahead and start this.
What could possibly go wrong?
And why they spent so many megabytes on... And we're not even talking about... Well, I guess we can talk about megabits on voices. I have no idea. And also, Bubsy's huge. It's a big sprite. Look how big he is. And the tiles, even though they don't really... Graphically, it's not that good. There's a lot of animation that you don't even really notice. And everything's just too big, even though, as I was saying, the graphics are kind of repetitive. But the tiles, it takes so many tiles to compose anything. Like this tree right here. It's a big tree. It's composed of a lot of tiles. There's not a lot to it. So I'm going to show you one of the programming flaws of Bubsy. I've talked about a lot of the problems. This is something that's interesting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start running to the right and then I'm going to jump. After I jump, I'm going to pull back in the opposite direction. Now you can't completely go back. You can only straighten out your jump. But then I'm going to release it. And watch what happens. So I'm running, jump, straighten it out, and then I release. And you'll notice that he starts moving to the right again. I landed on the tree. Let me do it again. Watch. See, when you release it, he starts moving to the right again. Isn't that strange? That's such a simple thing. It's a bug. I don't know that it's a bug. It's so much as it is completely overlooked programming. But isn't that weird? And you can do it the other way, too. So it sort of just exemplifies kind of what was going on with this game that... And it makes you wonder... And I'm going to reset this because well, let's go ahead and just kind of play through the game a little bit. We're not going to play through the game. And see, here's enemies just kind of standing around. And again, I think it's very possible because of all these balls of yarn that maybe when you get hit, you were supposed to lose all the yarn. And the other thing is, Bubsy is so huge. You can't see too much in front of the screen. So it's difficult to know where you're going. So a game that's supposed to be about speed, as Sonic was, you simply just can't run very fast. So I'm trying to go slow because I'm not that familiar with the game. There, see, I just ran right into that. And I wasn't even sure that was an enemy. But again, that's an enemy that's just appearing and going straight down as opposed to really having any physical interactions with the scenery. Am I dead? Yes, I'm dead because that thing hit me. It's very difficult for anyone to truly... See, I almost slid right into that. Defend this game. There's nothing to defend. There's really... I'm not sure what I could say positively about this game. Except, thankfully, it didn't sell all that well. This is a game that was very hyped. You know, Accolade really believed they had something. They spent a lot of money advertising this. And this was a very expensive game. Because it was 16 meg when it came out, which, that's a lot. I think it was a $70 game when it came out. I know Street Fighter 2 was 24 meg on the Super NES, and it was, I think, $75. I think this one was 70. So it's... I knew that was going to happen. I was like, well, I tried to jump just a little bit, but I ended up going up too high. Let's see, what's the minimum I can jump? So actually, that's the minimum I can jump. Here's the maximum. Almost no difference whatsoever. I keep trying to get that thing, even though it's like a checkpoint marker. Oh, here's these creepy trains again. And you know, here's another example to use. Accolade was looking for a mascot game. That's what they wanted. See, there's another enemy that's just standing there. Oh my god, I have a lot of lives, thankfully. But you can't sit there and just say, well, we're going to do a mascot game, we're going to do a platformer, we're going to copy Sonic. Especially if you're going to leave out the best part of Sonic, the thing that really made Sonic work. If you think about, for example, Mario is a mascot. Mario's a great mascot. But Mario isn't a great character. He's evolved over the years. If you think about going back to Jumpman, which I believe is, I think that's what Mario was called in Donkey Kong, right? That wasn't an interesting character. He was like a construction worker, and there was nothing interesting about him. Then they brought him to Mario Brothers, and they decided, let's make him a plumber and have him in a sewer. There's nothing interesting about that. It's just, you know, it's unique. It hadn't been done before. And then when they got to Super Mario Brothers, it was strange because, again, they brought Mario back, but now they put him in sort of a fantasy world. At least, I guess, to a certain degree. They had these, sort of like, I mean, if you think about Bowser, you could maybe make the argument that his castle was some sort of sewer stronghold or something. You could make that argument, I suppose. So it sort of kept in with the other themes. But, you know, going down the pipes and everything, that was the plumber stuff. But the thing is that it was an amazing game. An amazing game. That's why it worked. That's why Mario became successful. If Super Mario Brothers wasn't considered a great game, Mario may have disappeared, and Miyamoto may have come up with something else. Mario's not an amazing mascot. The games are amazing, and therefore... I mean, think about Sonic. Who cares? Sonic's just a blue hedgehog. Why was he amazing? He had attitude. Why did he have attitude? I don't know what made him have attitude, because he was fast. There was nothing about Sonic that... Look at that. Fall damage. Are you shitting me? I died because I fell too far. Who does that? In a platformer. Did that actually just happen? I died because of fall damage? That's strange. And I almost feel like they did it because they had a lot of animations. They wanted to show that animation. That's insane. But Sonic's not a great design. It was a great game. And don't get me wrong, there have been some pretty cool games with characters that didn't really catch on. Jazz Jackrabbit, great platformer. Not that interesting, but at the same time with Jazz Jackrabbit, you could tell it was, you know, trying to be a quote-unquote mascot. And at the same time, did Jazz Jackrabbit really do anything all that new? You gotta do something new to be interesting. I actually beat the first level. About a 6 frames of animation victory. A huge sprite, probably 4 times bigger than he needed to be. Now, different level, looks exactly like the previous one. Makes you wonder where all those megs and megs and megs of 16 megs were used for? How many of them were used for voices? I wonder. So look, Bubsy the Bobcat, and I think Bubsy 2 was a better game. And it wasn't a good game either. But it felt like a little bit more... Oh, fall damage. I'm dead again. Unbelievable. So it is fall. You die from fall damage. I forgot. Completely forgot about that. So what does Bubsy get in terms of a numeric score? It's difficult because there are people who actually enjoy this game. They legitimately like this game. I think it's borderline criminal because it has a completely broken fundamental where it's supposed to be about speed, but you can't go fast. In fact, alright, I'm going to try to go fast. Let's see how long I last. I'm going to play it exactly as I would play Sonic. I was almost dead right there. I jumped just because. And he takes so long to get going. Kind of like Sonic did. I guess that was done for that reason. Let's see how long I can last. I got the... Well, that's a short level. Let's do the next level. Obviously, my point is proven better the quicker I die. I could certainly die on purpose, but I'm not going to do that. We'll see how long I can last. So I'm going to play it like I would play a Sonic level.
More like a bridge too short.
See how long I can last. Yep, dead. And again, they had to have a lot of these pitfalls because of... See, now I know it's coming. Now I have to take it slower. Where was it? Was it? See, there's one right there. See, now I'm not going fast again. I mean, look at this. Come on. Oh, boy, and that's because you slide. Oh, that guy was actually... You know what? I think that dude was actually moving.
Too short.
I think he was actually moving up and down a slope. That was crazy. That doesn't happen very often. Let's see if I can make this jump. Why did you even put that there? It looks like you can make that jump. The answer is no. I do not want to continue. So Bubsy the Bobcat, a failed attempt at Accolade doing something that they flat out didn't need to do. You can't sit there, as I said, with Mario. Mario's great now. They evolved the characters, they added new characters. They didn't really have to change anything, which is amazing. Toad and Mario and Luigi and the Princess and Bowser, they've all pretty much been the same. But there's personality there. Bubsy doesn't have any personality. Just because he says quote-unquote funny things, which none of it's funny, just because he has an exclamation point on his shirt, that doesn't mean he has personality. It's an attempt at personality. But no one cares about any of that. You know, Mario very rarely talks, and he has more personality because what Bubsy says is incredibly annoying. He's just obnoxious because he tries so damn hard to be something that he has no right being. And this was Accolade's attempt at doing something that they thought was really going to put them on the map, and Bubsy was a bad mistake. You can't just sit there and say, we're going to make a mascot game, and, you know, we're going to do just what Sega and Nintendo did, and really those are the only ones you could even mention, and we're going to even copy Sega. You really need to make a good game first, and Accolade, they didn't make good games. They really didn't. Bubsy was probably their best shot, and it kind of amazes me that when they played this, they couldn't see the fundamental flaw. It seemed like they were looking at the presentation, and that's all they cared about. They thought that's all gamers cared about. The gameplay was good enough. That's what sold this game, that it had good enough gameplay. But the gameplay's not good enough. It's absolutely horrible. And again, it's kind of amazing when you think about the difference between this and Sonic. They put this out on the Super Nintendo, and it had to be a certain type of game. They had to do certain things with it. They had to make concessions because the Super Nintendo CPU wasn't fast enough. This was the wrong game for the Super Nintendo. If they had released this on the Genesis, they may have been able to do some things to counter the problems of the game, where you can't go fast enough unless you've memorized the damn level. And again, it seems like such a simple thing with Sonic, where you get hit and you lose all your rings. And again, if you think about it even more so, trying to explain that to someone a long time ago, that's the brilliance of Sonic, is that very few people would have read that synopsis of the gameplay and said, yeah, that's brilliant, that's going to work. Almost everyone would have said, nope, makes the game too easy. And with Bubsy the Bobcat, you take something like that out because the Super NES couldn't handle it. And again, I think the balls of yarn were supposed to act like rings. They're everywhere, just like the rings were. They even put some of them in boxes like the ring boxes. So was it the Super NES hardware couldn't handle it? Which there's no way it could. Again, we saw in the Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse when you had 5 or 6 sprites on screen from those little coin boxes that the CPU couldn't handle it.
Worked for Clint.
Or was it a situation where it said, it's too much like Sonic? It would have been interesting to see if they had released a game that was pretty much exactly like Sonic. Again, think about how quickly Sonic burned out, too. I don't think Bubsy, even if they had done that, it could have competed with Sonic, even if you had your Sonic on the Super Nintendo. So I'm rambling now, so I'm going to give this a numeric score. Try to give some of these games numeric scores. And this isn't a retroactive score. I'm not grading it on a curve. This is based on if it's a fun game, and it's not a fun game. This game is about a 4.5. That's what I give this game. There are people who will enjoy it. They shouldn't, but they will. It's a 4.5. The only area it excels in is presentation, and even that's a little bit questionable. I do give them credit for trying to do something on the Super Nintendo. At times it's pretty impressive. At other times it's just horrific. It's a game that really is kind of like I would call it the Deadly Premonition of 1992. There's people out there that love it, but as a whole, it's a bad game. The end. You cannot argue that this is a good game. If you're going to argue it, then I guess there's probably about maybe 650 Super Nintendo games that you'd have to consider to be